Hello and welcome to another collab review video. This event has been live for a few days, so I'm a bit late to this video, but this is New Year's, so there's not really much to talk about. This is another event where you can save your stones and easily skip, especially if you're an older player and you have enough trade fodder for New Year's Wadatsumi. But before I talk about him, let me at least briefly flash all the other units in this machine. You can create a system with 4 Spikas and 4 Mitsukis, but they're both pretty bad systems. I think I briefly remember using a Spika system for something. Also, Mitsuki's equip is one of the few with 2 heal OEs. I don't really see a use for Hattori and Ameno. I guess you could use Ame for her button active, but for button farming, 100k damage is not much nowadays, and even if you wanna suffer through 5 animations, 500k damage is also not that much. Leyland as a unit is also pretty useless. Her equips have a good amount of OEs, and also Team RCBs are rarely very useful. Yamato's actually kinda decent, but only for swiping non-super gravity dungeons. But Shiba Dragon and friends already dominate that department, and his equip is pretty decent, as he has a killer and some bulk and damage awakenings. And the active is a bit interesting, but I'm not entirely sure where to use it. Since he creates some fire and heal orbs, I first thought of Shanna, but then I actually remembered that she raises her own damage cap to 6 billion by herself. Maeda doesn't really provide much. He doesn't have any full resist, he doesn't do that much damage, he doesn't have a skill bind resist awakening, but at least he has a double L and 2 attributes. His active is pretty lackluster too. This could have been a looping shield, and then he actually became a decent. His equip has solid awakenings. It has a cross, OEs, and 2 CMHPs. It also has a T, but that's completely useless right now. Kana looks pretty solid. Her equip is pretty interesting, as by itself it's a looping damage amp and a looping time buff. I think most looping active buffs only double your move time, but this one actually triples it, and with her active being on a 7-turn cooldown and giving you a skill charge, you could create some interesting systems with other units with those characteristics. Her equip is also decent. Although there's a few equips out there with full unbind and double TPAs, this is the only one with the full jammer resist. Ganesha is a good leader for farming coins, but I'm pretty sure that's not relevant at all, as coins are the most useless currency in the game. Maybe he's more useful for newer players. Ganesha also has a button active, and I don't think it's that bad since you can do up to 1.5 million damage, but then you have to sit through 3 animations. This might be relevant in dungeons where some monsters have resolve. His equip is not that bad. It gives some decent utility, but it gives you no bulk, and you can always use the active in something like the first floor of Vault UN4 or in your button farming team. Capri doesn't do that much damage in super gravity dungeons, but she could bring a decent amount of utility with her awakenings and her active. A 7-turn cooldown is about average for an active that gives you void attribute and damage absorption, but you might decide to bring Capri along if you're expecting to face combo and time debuffs. Her equip is decent too, as it gives you a lot of utility and bulk, and the break defense awakening could come in really handy on a unit with a high damage multiplier that doesn't have one. Tsukuyomi has an insanely high HP stat, and it's a decent enough cleric, and even though she has levitate, she's not gonna be doing any damage in super gravity dungeons. At least she has a double L and 2 attributes, so she can take the assist removal recovery latent. Her equip is not that special. It does bring some utility with the tape resist, team RCBs, and a heal TPA, but a double L on an equip is rarely useful as these get removed. Horus does more damage than Yomi, but you'll have to try hard to get him to damage cap. And for that, his own active could come in really useful, but again he's not that special. Also note that the active is on 7-turn cooldown and it gives you a skill charge. Pixel Horus is laughable. I'll just move on. Horus's equip is good if you need more move time. Ball is an Orbskin unit that you can't purchase anymore, and as a unit he's not that good. He does have a really low cooldown active that fully clears a Woken Bind, which is very situational. This reminds me of Dio-chan and Summer Taurus, and even though they don't fully clear a Woken Bind, they also tackle unmatchable orbs. So Bal is probably not as useful as those other two, unless you're expecting to encounter consecutive Awoken Bind skills that are longer than 5 turns. Bal has a pretty decent triple team HP equip that also has the highest damage multiplier in the game, but it's only a matter of time until we get one with a 10C. Alato is also an Orbskin you can't purchase anymore, and I can't really see why you would want to do that. While she has a pretty good amount of utility, her active leaves a lot to be desired, and her 2 equips are pretty disappointing too. Honestly, I expect more from Orbskin units. Priscilla is a full cleric that can really pack a punch, but from clerics you usually want some more utility in the form of heal TPAs, and she also doesn't have a skill bind resist. So if you want to use her in a team, you'll have to patch up those holes with other units, and her equips are passable at best. Full blind resist is nice, but nowadays there's equips that also give you bulk or more skill boost. The second equip is one of the few with 2 heal TPAs, but it doesn't offer that much else. Skull can also do a lot of damage, but at the moment there's not really a team you can put her in. Sure, there's neither Ferule and Aki, but Skull doesn't bring anything to the table there. Her equip looks fairly decent at first, but if you don't care about the 7x6 active, then you're better off using Ace equip, since it's also 5 effective skill boost, but it gives you a bunch of OEs. Next is Enola and Artemis, and I am talking about them together because this is the dedicated New Year Nordis part of the video. Both of these units are really good subs in New Year Nordis teams, especially Enola, since she'll be taking care of healing in these teams, and her delay and double L could come in really handy in dungeons like Gold UN 2. Enola's equip is also pretty solid. It gives you bulk, utility, and damage, and you can put this equip on a unit with a 1 cooldown active. Of course the loop is pretty long, so an enemy could negate your buffs early in the loop, and you'll probably die before you can activate this again. But as long as you know your way around the dungeon, you could plan around this. And Artemis is good for Nordis teams because of her active, since you will need a Pierce active, and either a Void damage absorption or Void attribute absorption. And since she also has TPAs, especially the base form, you can take care of unmatchable debuffs without using an active. And her equip is not that special. Since most of us are gonna use New Year units, as New Year Wadatsumi trade fodder, I would try to keep as many copies as possible of these two units, or at least have them low on the chopping block. But should you care about New Year Nordis? Yes, I think so. I would honestly try to get at least 3 copies of him. I will be actually farming for 12 of him, or maybe more. And while New Year Nordis doesn't have as much damage as Misaka or Aki, with his double 7C awakening, he does 4 times more damage than Shiba Dragon and other double break systems. So New Year Nordis will definitely be used a lot for farming content, so you should definitely try to farm a few of them, especially if you didn't manage to complete your Misaka or Aki systems. Sure, Nordis is unable to farm UN 4 and 5, but he can at least do dungeons like all UN 2, which is something that Shiba Dragon is not really able to do. Okay, for the next few units I'll try to go a little bit more into detail, but there's not really much to say. First up is Aten, and while he can do a lot of damage, especially if his killers are applicable, he's missing a few important things, so I'm not really a fan. Most notably, he doesn't have a guard break awakening, so you'll have to go out of your way to put an equip that has it, since this is needed for new dungeons where spawns have high defense stats. And also he doesn't have any skillbind resist, so that's something you have to take into consideration when building a team around him, which might be another hole in your team that you might need to patch up with equips. And his equip is not that bad. It does give you a lot of bulk and some damage, but the cooldown on this is pretty low, so you'll have to be constantly conscious about overcharging this, since the active is pretty bad most of the time. Next is Lajoa, who could work as a light and dark PvP leader, since he has an OK damage multiplier and a decent enough leader skill. You can technically make a system with 2 of them, but a Lajoa team is gonna be pretty weak against enemies that constantly mess with your board. Honestly, the only notable thing about Lajoa is his brush. It gives you a lot of bulk, some RCB, a skill boost, tape, and a finger. And with the 75% shield, you could stall at the beginning of dungeons. I think last year I exchanged for him for this equip, and I have used it a lot ever since. But I probably wouldn't do that today. Halloween Shackle's equip is almost identical. She was also exchangeable, so you might have a copy, or maybe you rolled one this past Halloween. Lajoa's second equip is not as good. While it has some utility and a gap killer, it has that bad active skill from the base form, which I guess you could use to override Poison and Jammer Skyfalls, but that's a pretty rare scenario. And if you need to do that, why not use Fenrir's equip? Sure, it doesn't have some utility awakenings, but it gives you a lot of HP, and it's way more accessible. Dark Lajoa does a lot of damage. He's one of the few units with 7 BDP awakenings. One of the other ones is the original Lajoa, which is a REM only card that you can sometimes exchange for. And another unit with 7 BDPs is a farmable. While you can create a system with 2 Lajoas, and you need 3 copies of Cyberman to create a system, the fact that he's a farmable with 3 attributes and a damage cap break active is insane competition for Lajoa. This is more of a reason not to trade for Lajoa, unless again, you really want that brush equip, because that dark equip is also nothing to write home about. I mean, it's not bad, but again, I don't think it's worth to chase or exchange for Lajoa. Base New Year Lutina has a decent amount of utility, but unfortunately she has 3 10Cs taking up space. These don't provide any meaningful damage in super gravity dungeons, so it's sad that 2 of them were not condensed and an awakening with more utility was added. It was also a bit disappointing that the restriction on her active skill was not removed. Gonho decided to remove all the restrictions and conditions on Ultraman units, so it would have been pretty cool if they had done that here. I mean, maybe it's understandable. She would have been pretty broken. Maybe this will get removed next year, but by then there's gonna be a lot of stronger units out there. Lutina's Harp is arguably the strongest delay equip, since it's effectively 5 skill boosts with 2 team HPs, a 7C, and 2 water OEs. In the age of 10C and double 7C equips, a single 7C might not seem that great, but it's still something. Her second equip is not that special. It is a triple team HP equip, but there's so many out there and this one doesn't provide any effective skill boost, have different color OE awakenings, or a useful active, but it's still pretty decent. This Lutina is a unit that could be good on light and dark teams, but again, those aren't really a thing. She's got a full bind and a walk-in bind clear active, but does not take care of unmatchables. Instead, she's meant to use the unmatched recovery latent, but honestly that might be too much of a hassle most of the time, so it's probably just better to run a dedicated cleric that will fully clear binds and recover unmatchable on her active. She surprisingly has a scaling leader skill, but who can you pair her with? Her equip has okay awakenings, but like I previously said, there's a good amount of double TPA equips, and I guess this one has the most OEs. But it also has a very low cooldown, so it might overcharge, and the active is very situational. Reeche got a really nice buff. She does a pretty good amount of damage, but for newer dungeons, you'd really want to put an equip with guard break. She does have an insanely high cooldown, but with those 3 skill charge awakenings, she'll be up in no time. And once you get her going, you'll only have 1 turn of downtime in between her actives. She's very often used in co-op teams, since it's really easy to reach 30 skill boosts in those teams, and 7 turns of void attribute and damage absorption will probably be enough for the whole dungeon. And her equips are pretty nice too. The first equip doesn't really have any effective skill boost, and it has a high cooldown, so you'll probably not get to use her active at the beginning of a dungeon. Still, this equip has a good amount of utility and bulk. Her second equip is also a good source of bulk, OEs, and damage with her 3 color awakening. But the active skill is not the best, and if you disregard the active skill and the OEs, there's an equip that's more accessible and stronger for rainbow teams. Sakuya Origin. Reeche's new Evo does a lot of damage too, and unlike the base form, it comes with a built-in guard break awakening. But this is a bit of an abomination. She's a Reeche unit with a void attribute and damage absorb active. Yes, her Evo skill does it in the base active, but afterwards she won't be doing what a Reeche unit is supposed to do. The final active skill is not the worst, and it might come in handy in newer dungeons where there's multiple portions and negative orb debuffs. But you can find a different dedicated sub for that, since her base active won't be that useful, especially at the beginning of a dungeon where you might need a skill charge or a delay. A fun fact about this Evo is that it's one of 3 non-transforming units with more than 4.55 effective HP that has combos and Fua in its leader skill. It's a little bit more usable than Ryu and Ken, since it's not restricted to a monster type, nor is it as gimmicky as Hades Dragon, since you usually use him to cheese dungeons. New Year Ferule finally got her buff. Ever since her introduction, she's stuck around as being a top tier leader, but does her buff bring her back? Almost. Don't get me wrong, she's still plenty strong, and can clear almost all content. For some of the newer dungeons, she will struggle with damage output. Yes, she does reach ridiculous damage multipliers, but she'll be stuck at 4 billion damage cap, and will struggle with green, high defense spawns. Also, I think she will suffer, since we probably won't get the newer marble units, even if the marble rerun does happen. So I don't think chasing Ferule is a good idea this time around, since you'll need at least 2 copies of her. Both of newer Ferule's equip are really strong. The first equip got a really strong buff, and it comes to show how far power creep has come. On release, I think this only had 2 skill boost awakenings, and Gongo had to give it 2 team HPs, a CPA, and 4 OEs to make someone consider using this. And like I said, the second equip is also pretty strong, just for the double 7C and 2 team HPs, and with that full awakening, is an amazing equip for New Year Ferule teams. I guess the bad thing about these equips is that they have a really low cooldown, and these actives might not be the best in most situations. Next is the new Orb skin, Chuan, who is a fairly decent looping shield option. She has a decent enough damage multiplier, so she's not that bad, and her active skill can also take care of board shrinkage, so in that sense, she's kinda similar to Pixel Clive, and even though he has a higher cooldown, he can give you more skill boost and skill bind resist, and in classic Chuan fashion, she has a pretty funny leader skill. Good luck to those that wanna try leading with her. Chuan's first equip is pretty good, as it is 6 effective skill boosts, and it also has 2 team RCBs and 2 fingers. Chuan's second equip is really strong too. Based on its awakenings, this is somewhat close to this equip. Chuan's equip is not as good as this in my opinion, mainly due to the active skill, but this is a unit you don't have to roll for, and you can just purchase her. But I wouldn't really do it. Yes, Chuan is a really strong unit with 2 strong equips, but you might already have a bunch of looping shields in your monster box, and I don't think those equips are worth $20. Next is Kamimusubi, and there's really not much to say about her, because everyone knows she's amazing with Shiba Dragon. Even though Shiba Dragon has a bunch of leaders out there, like Jonathan and Christmas Celica, Kami remains the best, especially in Colosseums where you wanna heal. So if you don't have one, definitely consider trading for one, since it's a relatively cheap trade. But maybe try not to use New Year units as trade fodder until after you have traded for NY Wadatsumi, if you plan to do so. I was going to mention that maybe she's not a high priority, but most of the time in certain Colosseums, you're leading with a collab unit, and you either want to have Kami as your helper or as a sub, so it's best to own one so you don't have to rely on friends. And her equip is pretty decent too, although the cooldown is pretty short. Next is the new BGM, Menuit, who is a pretty strong card, but I think she has limited uses. Obviously with the double L and 3 attributes, she's really good for assist recovery removal, but she has an insanely long transformation cooldown, and her post-transformation active is easily replaceable, and it's not that unique. I have seen her used as a sub in Muichiro teams, but in those you'll already have at least 4 units that also have a 30-turn cooldown transformation active, so you'll need to bring equips with 2 or more skill boosts to transform on turn 1. Instead of running Menuit, a lot of Muichiro teams run Pixel Jill, who has a similar enough active, more skill boost, and since she doesn't transform, you can equip her with a delay or a haste. Obviously Jill doesn't do as much damage as Menuit, but Muichiro and NY Wadatsumi already do so much damage that you don't really need Jill to do any. By herself, Menuit can be a decent enough leader, as she has a really strong leader skill, with a decent damage multiplier, plus 4 combos, follow-up damage, and a really high effective HP multiplier. Her first equip is really strong, it's 5 effective skill boosts, it comes with a team HP, a 3 color awakening, and 4 water OEs. This equip is insane, even more so if you put it on a rainbow or semi-rainbow unit. This reminds me of Wolverine and Magneto's equip, which is probably better if you value team HP. But even if the rerun does happen, we probably won't get the reskin version of this unit. Her second equip is not as strong, but it's still really strong. Triple team HP with a full jammer resist and a finger and 2 effective skill boosts. Obviously the cooldown is really high, but it's still really strong. If you tend to occasionally buy bundles, it might not be a bad idea to get this, but $30 is a pretty steep price for an equip. And finally, Wadatsumi and Yamatsumi. If you're looking forward to playing with Muichiro, you should definitely get this unit. If Muichiro is Kurotobi, then Wadatsumi is Garnerb. So by getting NY Wadatsumi, you'll only be required to have 2 Muichiros instead of 3. And the good thing about Wadatsumi is that he's exchangeable for 15 NY units. If you're an older player, you probably have a punch lying around. And if you're like me, you're probably kicking yourself because you remember you've sold a handful of Leylins and Spikas for box space. So definitely pick him up, though he really won't get much use until we get Muichiro. I guess until then you can have him as an equip, since it's pretty decent. It has a 10C, a bunch of OEs, and 2 effective skill boosts. Maybe if you have a lot of trade fodder, get 2 Wadatsumis for the equip, but I really wouldn't stress over it, because what if next year there's a new unit you can exchange for with 15 garbage New Year units? So to summarize, it's not a good idea to roll in New Year's, unless you need a little more trade fodder for NY Wadatsumi, and maybe don't exchange for him until we get all the free rolls from the login stamps. Menuit is a really strong card, but she's not worth the chase, but she might be worth $30 to you. NY Ferule is definitely not worth $30, but it might be to you if you want to complete your system. Kami remains a strong leader for Shiba Dragon teams, and you only need to exchange 4 6-star GFEs, so she's relatively cheap and could be a nice investment. I don't think the other 9 and 8-star exchangeables are that much worth it, so use your own discretion if you want one of those. The same goes for the Chuan bundle. She's an okay looping shield and has 2 pretty good equips, but I don't think she's all that. And also I highly recommend farming 3 New Year Nordis, at the very least. He will be used a lot in future Colosseums, and he's also useful to farm UN2 and alt UN2. Alright, that does it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. This one was a little bit late due to technical issues, and I almost didn't want to finish it, but better late than never. See you guys next time. Goodbye.